following takes place between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. Event security.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to FPC Radio Live. I think we're live. We're having a little bit of a connection issue there, so I apologize for the choppy intro video. But yes, I assure you, we are here. We are live. We are ready to talk some football and some potential, John. You know, I was telling you right before we got on the air that I was starting to move on with my life, and by that I mean I was accepting what we've all come to accept, and that is, well, Tom Brady's retired. He's never going to play football again. We're not going to wake up Sunday mornings and television to watch Tom Brady throw footballs. Well, he gave a less than definitive answer last night to Jim Gray when it came to his playing future. Now, again, this could be a lot of lip service, John. That's fine. I understand that. But he could have very easily just said, look, I'm retired. That's it. That's a decision I made, and I'm happy with it. And in a way, he did say that, but then also he just kept the door completely wide open to pull a Brett Favre. And you know what? I said before that I didn't think he was going to do it. I didn't want him to do it. But sign me up. 100% pull a Brett Favre. Take the summer off, Tom. It's the summer of Tom. All right? Do what you got to do. Come back, play 3 more years, and maybe win a Super Bowl or 2.
Well, the big difference between Brett Favre and Tom Brady is their approach to football, right? Brett Favre was not a guy who was a workout warrior who watched 12 hours of film every day, even in the offseason. There was really no offseason for Tom Brady. There was for Brett Favre. So I think if Brady wants to come back, and play in September, there's a process for him, right? Especially, I know he's defied age, but there's still a process where, he has to work very hard to stay in tip-top shape, which I think he can probably do anyway. That's just the way he rolls. I don't expect we're going to see Tom Brady next fall not playing football weighing 275 pounds. I don't think that's part of his DNA. But they approach the position a lot differently. Like Brett Favre wouldn't throw a football for months and then show up at OTAs or training camp and be ready to, whereas Brady, it's much more measured the way he does things. He's like a great director that, by the time they start shooting the film, he's already got the film in his head. Whereas Brett Favre was more of a guy that just kind of, went on a riff. So I think that approach is a little bit different. He doesn't sound like a guy that wants to retire. I mean, it doesn't sound, unless it's now a process of, the whatever 4 stages of retirement grieving, like, I can't believe I'm retired. What do I do? And then you start to ease into it. I think as time goes on, maybe we'll get a better sense, like 2 months from now when Brady's like, yeah, I think I made the right decision. I feel pretty comfortable with this. And he's got plenty of things to do. It's not like he's, going to be, watching QVC or whatever and ordering stuff to the house.
Well, I see. I'm picturing this. This is my wishful thinking in me. I'm picturing, if you're a Arrested Development fan, Job, those many cut scenes where they go away and he's saying, I think I made a terrible mistake. That's about Tom Brady a week at home without any football. And I think I'm hoping that maybe that's the case. And look, I mean, that's the fandom in me. That's the fan in me. I mean, obviously the guy's 44 years old. He can do whatever the hell he wants. If he wants to stay retired, he can stay retired. But look, I mean, if he wants to come back, maybe he realized maybe he made this decision a little bit too hastily. I mean, I was actually, to be honest, I was kind of surprised, unless, again, this was a decision obviously he had been thinking of throughout the season. And I don't doubt that at all. But, I was surprised that it came so quickly. Maybe the leak, the news leak is what pushed it a little bit quicker than maybe he wanted to. But you know what? Hey, if he gets a feeling in a few weeks that he's like, you know what, I want to play. Guess what?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure if it's not the Buccaneers, there's going to be a handful of franchise, and I'm pretty sure too that the Buccaneers would welcome him back with open arms. Certainly at this point, I mean, you're so early in we haven't even played the Super Bowl yet. So there's still a lot of time logistically for the team to work around that. There will come a time where if he goes to the Buccaneers, they would need to know, because again, it could turn into not necessarily a Favre Rodgers situation, because I don't think they have anyone on the roster right now that resembles, that predecessor. And then I'm talking about Aaron Rodgers to Brett Favre. But it could put them in a predicament, say they have a tight cap or whatever. And I don't know what the math or the financials would be when it comes to that. But, at a certain point, they would need to know an answer. But hey, if that means maybe he goes and plays in San Francisco for a year, I'd be all right with that. You know what I mean? Like at this point, like I'm okay with him going and just collecting all the championships, just going team to team, year to year. I don't think that's realistic, obviously, because the game of football, it's harder to do that. But, for 1 or 2 years, if he decides that, hey, you know what, I'm tired of this whole retirement thing. Brady brand, you know what, it's nice and all, but I can only stay in comfortable sweatpants for so long. I need to get out there and start throwing some footballs around. So, look, like I said, this is my inner struggle inside of me between fandom and being objective and not necessarily objective, but realistic is probably the better word. Realistically, I don't think there's a very big chance, certainly not at this point, that he's going to do that. But we've seen him make bigger comebacks before, so you never know. You never know.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with him too is that the notion that some people have floated out there, and look, everybody has an opinion on it, and God bless us, that he's just going to stay retired, but next October so and so gets hurt, and Tom Brady's going to want to come back. I think that's kind of beneath him, to be, let's bring him in as an emergency quarterback. That's not how he works. I mean, again, Brett Favre could kind of do that because he was a guy in the huddle who would drop the plays on the dirt. He didn't know what nickel coverage was for a lot of his career. Brady is a lot more than just the quarterback. He's all in. So I don't think that that's ever going to happen. Maybe San Francisco's in play, but again, the Buccaneers own his right. So for him to play elsewhere, they're going to have to cooperate and maybe trade him at that point, and then just admit at this point, well, we got 2 years out of him. The value of the franchise went up, whatever, $1 billion. We won a Super Bowl. He made us relevant. Okay, let's be fair and move him to where he wants to go at that point, whether it's San Francisco or Tennessee or wherever. It's just fascinating that the two biggest stories in the offseason will be, is Tom Brady really retired, and where is Aaron Rodgers going to play in 2022? The two oldest quarterbacks in the league will still kind of control the narrative in the offseason, similar to the way the NBA spends its offseason wondering, well, is LeBron going to come back with the Lakers? Is James Harden going to sign elsewhere as a free agent? What's going to happen in LA with the Clippers? Like that. The offseason seems to be more interesting than the regular season in the NBA, and the NFL's kind of heading in that direction, although the games are still very captivating.
Well, if you think about the offseason in the NFL, I mean, Tom Brady, anyone in New England knows this. He hasn't necessarily attended OTAs for several years. So missing those early June practices and late May practice isn't necessarily a big deal. So realistically, it's February 8th right now. February, March, April, May. You have, I mean, if you wanted to push the decision, he has about 4 months, which is really an eternity in the NFL to make that decision. So, he could come to that decision. Maybe he thinks about it for a month, and then the urge and the need to play becomes stronger and stronger. And you know what? And maybe by March 15th, maybe beginning of April, he says, maybe he calls the Buccaneers and is like, hey, look, I kind of want to play again. And, maybe that they're like, hey, you know what, come on in. They'd be happy to have him back. Or to your point, maybe they decide, okay, we understand that you want to come back. It's not going to fit with what we're doing because of the decisions they made with the assumption that he was retired. So there's a lot of complications. It's not as easy as him just saying, hey, I'm going to come back. But the point is, he has time to make that decision. And who knows, John? Maybe this recent revelation coming from Deflategate is what has changed his mind. Maybe he's like, you know what? I'm not going to. He's not going to sue the league. I saw people, and look, I understand the response, and you think like, I'm surprised this is honestly not getting as much coverage. I mean, I'm surprised, but I'm not surprised, John, that this isn't getting as much coverage. But it's I mean, you're talking about really just an absolute sham of a investigation that really hurt his reputation. And if he wanted to, he can make a big fuss about it. Now, I don't think he will. I think that's all of this is behind him in terms of any sort of direct action. You know what I'm saying? I'm sure in the back of his mind, this still gets to him. Every time he sees Roger Goodell, I'm sure, issue that statement. I'm sure he just thinks in his mind about Deflategate and, this whole just sham of an investigation that we knew at the time, but has since been kind of enlightened to some of the naysayers out there. So maybe he sees this and he's like, you know what, f them. I'm not going to sue them, but you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to come back and win another Super Bowl because that's
Mhm.
what I do. I'm Tom Brady. So maybe that's the case. Maybe I'm getting a little bit too. My wrestling fandom is kind of seeping in, and I'm coming up with these storylines. So I'm like, all right, well, we could have a Falls Count Anywhere match with Tom Brady and Roger Goodell, and maybe the winner of that could go on to host the Super Bowl. I don't know. I'm getting a little bit crazy right now, but
Well, I do recommend Prozac at that point.
no, well, like I said, we'll see. I mean, look, if this is it, if this is it, and he's retired, then again, I was getting close to moving on, but again, this has kind of sucked me back into it a little bit. But if he retires, he retires, and everything we've said before about him is still reigns true. If he does decide to come back, you know what? It's going to get some pushback, mostly from people that were finally like relieved that he was gone, and like, oh, what are you coming back for? And that's the thing, John. And I love the people who say this, and I say I don't really love them. I'm just saying that this guy should retire. It's time to give it up.
Right.
Yeah, you know what
So
I
if he
mean?
wants
Like,
to
who
play,
are
he
you to say?
plays.
Like, yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, yeah, there's points in time where you look and you're like, this athlete is obviously. I mean, Ben Roethlisberger, for example,
Right.
obviously past his
Yep.
prime. People are like, oh, you should have hung him up, years ago. It's like, why? Why? You're asking a human being to give up the thing that they've spent at that point in their lives a majority of their lives working towards. I always get a kick out of that when fans just say, oh, he should just give it up, it's time, move on, let the younger generation. No. Hey, if he wants to play, God bless him, you know what I mean. If he wants to play and someone's willing to give them an opportunity, let them have it. I don't care, like, do your passion, you know what I mean. It's up to you. If you look like an ass on the field, well, again, that's on you. But hey, I'm not going to sit there and knock you for trying to play. So if he does come back, he's going to obviously get some criticism, but he gets criticism for whatever he does. So
Yeah, I just see 2 months from now. I don't know. This could happen as well, where he's just getting antsy, and he knows that's the time you're really ramping up during the off season,
exactly.
and the OTAs are coming, and then maybe Giselle just says, you're kind of driving me crazy here.
Exactly.
Now, this isn't the normal marriage. I mean, they live in a 28,000 square foot mansion. They have 12 pieces of property. They keep pretty busy. It's not like he's sitting in a recliner watching TV and she comes up with a list of things to do around the house. I mean, that's not the marriage they have.
She might get sick of him calling out the Mike linebacker in his sleep,
right? Exactly.
over and over again. So maybe that's like, you know what, Tom, go to work. You know what?
Yeah.
Retirement's not for you. We love you. Your kids love you. Get the hell out of the house. For the love of God, you're driving us crazy. And you know what?
I think that kind of happened with Bill Parcells. He retired, and I think he and his wife got divorced after about 4 months because she couldn't take it anymore.
It's like, this is who you are?
This is who because, again, you retire, you're still the same guy, right? I mean, I'm sure Parcells was barking orders around his house, and I'm sure Brady is, still up at 5 a.m. and I don't think he's a guy who's lounging around. So, it's almost like, oh, man, can we get this guy out of the house? He's driving us all a little bit nuts.
Yeah, hey, look, as a Brady fan, I'd be happy about that. So, all right, enough about Brady for now. I'm sure we'll have plenty of time in the offseason, which starts in about 5 days, 6 days from now. Couple other bits of news. All the NFL coaching hires have been completed. Mike McDaniel down in Miami. That was one of the last ones. Dennis Allen in New Orleans, and of course, Lovie Smith in Houston. And Dennis Allen, the Saints had a lot of good candidates. Obviously, Brian Flores was one of them. He issued a statement following Lovie Smith's hiring, saying, he probably didn't get the job because of the lawsuit. I would have preferred just congratulated him and you know what I mean?
Right.
That seems we're starting to get to the point where it's a little petty. Like I understand what he's saying and like, there's perhaps a lot of truth to what he's saying, but it kind of came across as a little too petty. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like I would could have just stopped his statement at congratulations to Lovie Smith. This is what we're trying to accomplish. End it right there. Don't all
Mhm.
of a sudden say, well, and because of that, because the lawsuit is probably that's the reason why. Because in a way, you're also saying, well, Lovie Smith wasn't the best candidate. I was, and it was
Right.
only because of the lawsuit that I didn't get the job. Well, that could be true. It could saying it's not, but to me, that just comes across as very petty and probably just unnecessary because I think you don't need to convince a lot of people to be on your side, Brian Flores. I think a lot of people are naturally gravitating towards your side. Don't give them a reason to not your
Mhm.
side. You know what I mean? And I felt like that was a little bit of a reason too. I'm not saying I'm not, but just relax a little bit. Let the process play out. Let this whole thing play out. Don't get a little bit too brass and a little bit too celebrity lawsuit. You know what I mean? Like let's
Yep.
just go through the
Exactly. Yeah.
process.
Mhm.
But when it comes to the hirings, obviously Mike McDaniel is getting a lot of has been getting a lot of praise and a lot of hype as kind of one of the next young guys, young studs when it comes to coaching. We know Lovie Smith's resume. He's a solid head coach, really good defensive guy. Perhaps maybe the best candidate for this transitioning Texans team. Get a veteran guy in there, someone who's been around the block before and certainly has handled some losing seasons in Chicago. Uh, the Dennis Allen, I get it because of his familiarity with the team, with the Saints, and how well that Saints defense certainly has played the last couple of years. But 8-28 as a head coach, and their statement being their criteria when it comes to you know looking for a head coach was partly because of head coaching experience. And again, if you're a Marvel fan out there, the first thing I thought of was, well, if you consider a failure experience, sure, like go ahead. Like
Right.
I guess that's experience if you want to consider it that. But so I mean, look, I'm not knocking the hire. I think unfortunately with this environment that we're in. It's no, no pun intended, but the hirings are very black and white, and again, it's not what I meant. You know what I mean? Like it's like
Mhm.
there's no gray area. It's like, oh, you hired Dennis Allen because of this. No, I mean, I'm sure the teams are facing pressure, and maybe they were just comfortable with Dennis Allen because they knew him and he's been with the team. It's not because you know what I mean. There's just a lot of unfortunately we're getting into that territory where it's like every hire is going to be scrutinized and
Mhm.
and for the most part maybe for the wrong reasons, but there is again a lot of validity to some of the criticism. It's just how far do we go with that? Is it full bear every time one coach doesn't get a job over another? Do we sit there and just go all in and criticize, or do we look at each situation individually and say, okay, as good of a candidate as Brian Flores was, maybe they just felt again comfortable with a guy who really fixed their defensive side of things in New Orleans. So again, we'll see how it plays out. I mean, I'm sure next season, Sean, we're going to be sitting right back here doing the same thing, having about 8 to 10 coach hires or openings, and
Mhm.
going through the same process and talking about the same candidates and everything like that. So, um, any thoughts in particular about any of these coaches? Good, bad, indifferent?
Yeah. I mean, it's just they're not. Here's the thing that I kind of lost touch with is I think what is happening in football is what happened in baseball, where I'm beginning to believe that the front office really does everything. Not only do they pick the players, I think they're actually coaching the players. We hear the stories that Nick Caserio's in the headset during the Texans games, as a direct pipeline right to the head coach, and that's all part of a process, almost like in baseball, where okay, here's the lineup you're going to use. Here are the substitutions you're going to use. You're going to bring this pitcher in this situation. It's like they've taken away any of the creativity or the actual managing in baseball or coaching in football, right? I mean, we just don't see any of those generals on the sideline, right? I mean, for the most part, for most of the NFL, you've had those commanding type presences on the sideline, right? Paul Brown, Vince Lombardi, Parcells, Chuck Noll, go right down. Or you've had like the borderline geniuses, which I would say Belichick on defense and Bill Walsh on offense, who were like just the, like the geniuses at their particular craft. Now we're just getting like young guys who are just going to go along with what the front office tells them, and it's going to be all done through analytics. And they're like offensive guys. Like this guy's a really good play caller.
I was going to say they're specialists.
Head coach. They're specialists, right? Whereas, Belichick's a unique case, obviously, but the guy coached special teams, offense, defense before he became a head coach. Lombardi and Tom Landry were assistant coaches, coordinators together with the Giants. Lombardi was actually the offensive coordinator, and Landry was the defensive coordinator on those great Giants teams of the 50s. I could have been the head coach because just let those guys run your units.
Yeah.
But those guys were commanding presences, weren't they? Now you just kind of see, here's a 37-year-old dude who's really good offensive mind, and it's more collaborative than it was in the past, and the general manager's involved, and analytics is involved, and it's not like, hey, I made this decision because I felt this was the right decision to make. So we're getting away from that. So I think that's just going to be an adjustment that fans are going to have to get used to, that you're not going to have those commanding figures on the sideline like you have in the past.
Well, again, I mean, part of it too is like, coaches don't get the sort of leeway that they should get nowadays.
Right.
Like, everything's so quick. Like, I mean, you got to give some time for these coaches, just like you do players, to kind of develop and implement their system. And I mean, like, look, I mean, what if the Kraft decided that after 5-11 first season in New England, they were like, you know what, this Belichick guy is not going to work out, and canned him. Well, that would have been a massive mistake, obviously. And in this situation, it's like, we're seeing coaches that are just, how many teams? I can't think of a team specifically off the top of my head, but like these teams that go through coaches every 2 years, like how are you supposed to implement anything? And it's like, a lot of these teams too are bad situations for these coaches coming into it. So, you don't have time to develop these guys. There's a lot shorter leash. And to your point, the in thing now is particularly the offensive guru because of how the game's played, but there's so much analytics involved to the point where like teams are built around analytics. Like maybe not so much in baseball as it is in baseball, but I feel like it's getting to that point. I mean, again, you have coaches in this league that are really devout analytics people. And it's like, well, why do you need coaches then? That makes sense then why the general manager is up there, or maybe he has, this is why you're hiring guys that are math whizzes or guys that have a finance background or stuff like that, because they're like, oh, well, they know numbers, this, that, and the other. And, maybe they have more of an input, but like, guys like Belichick and Andy Reid, those who, are kind of that old school cut of coaches. They appreciate the information, but, they're not going to blindly make decisions based on percentages or expectations or win probability. I mean, think about the win probability in that Buffalo Kansas City game. I mean, that went up and down. It's like, I mean, how each of those teams had probably a win probability of less than 5% twice. Like, so what the hell does that tell me? You know what I mean? It tells me nothing.
Right.
So yeah.
Well, here's a new saying I like. I think you're going to like this. Statistics tell us what's already happened, not what's going to happen.
Yeah, well, that's and that's,
you like that one?
I do, because it's right in line with how I view statistics. I see them more as not so much as a predictive measurement, but more of a, like you said, sit back and kind of you can add context to a situation with statistics. You can't, in my opinion, accurately predict any scenario. And I think that's the difference when it comes to quote unquote analytics people versus non-analytics people. It's not that I sit there and say those numbers are fictitious and they're made up. No. Clearly they're in front of you. And there's a difference between raw, non-objective statistics versus formulas. You know what I mean? Like, the wars and the QBRs and the EPAs, all that stuff are formulas, as opposed to, passing yards are passing yards and touchdowns are touchdowns. And you know what I mean? games played are games played. Like, you can't manipulate those. There's no formula to determine that. You just look and say, oh, he played X amount of games. So I do think there's a lot of value in some of those metrics. Again, you can't blind that. The problem is people will pick a handful of metrics and completely devout themselves to it. I mean, my buddy Skip, Uncle Skip, right? Loves QBR. Oh my God, QBR this, QBR that, QBR. Well, guess what? He gets so obsessed with that eventually QBR is going to have a flaw, and it's going to make his point look bad. And eventually you're going to have to sit there and try to explain, well, guess what? Now you look like an ass because you've been yelling about QBR, and then when it doesn't favor your point, you're going to go around and turn, do an about face and take the opposite approach. Well, no. If you understand, though, that statistics don't tell you everything, certainly not in the game of football, you can sit there and say, yeah, guess what? Every single statistic is not perfect. There are times when wins probably shouldn't go to the quarterback, but it doesn't mean that it's a bad stat. It just means, like, sometimes in a vacuum, it's not most accurate. So if you're going to sit there and tell me that, oh, on such and such occasion, teams complete X amount of, I don't care about that. All I care is about what's happening in that game right now, and with the team that's part of the equation. Like, again, collecting historical data based on the last 5 to 10 years of all these NFL teams, I don't care about. That tells me nothing about what's happening in a certain game. So to me, I can look back and say, like, in hindsight, I can say, oh, all right, well, teams generally complete X amount of plays on fourth down. Okay. That's about what you see on a regular basis. But if I'm going to use that information and say, oh, this is telling me that it's a higher percent. No, I don't care about higher percentage. I care about execution and situation and, the momentum swings in the game, because that's what football is about. And that's why football is great, because it's not just a game played on a stat sheet. There's so much more to it.
Peyton Manning talked about this, that, there's some drives, it's like, okay, let's get a field goal here. It's a choppy drive. They're starting to figure out some of the things we're doing. We got an opportunity to put 3 points on the board. Let's do it. 2006
AFC Championship Game, and I hate that I have to bring this up. The Patriots were up 21-3, and that's obviously the big comeback number, and rightfully so. You talk about that, but for those out there who remember, the Colts got a field goal at the very end of the half, and I remember sitting there and. I was in a room. I was in a room full of Colts fans, if you could believe that. It was just me as a Patriots fan. It random. I was down here, of all places. I was down here in Florida. I had a friend who was a Colts fan, and I watched the game over at his house. I was having a very good first half. Let's just put it that way, until that field goal. Because me, some fans are like, oh, whatever, it's 21-6, and me, I'm like, oh crap. That just kind of that changed everything. And it was just a field goal. It was just a field goal. And right off the bat, you could see that coming out of that half, the math didn't add up. An 18-point lead is great. A 15-point lead, that's a touchdown, and that's 2 touchdowns with 1 2-point conversion. All of a sudden, and just put it this way. 1 touchdown, all of a sudden, it's a much different game, as opposed to 1 touchdown, you're still up by 11. So yeah, I'm glad you said that. I mean, sometimes field goals are important, and that was one of the most important swings and for the Colts in that game, and negative swings for the Patriots in that game.
Just look at the AFC Championship game 2 weeks ago. It's 21-10. If Kansas City kicks a field goal there, 24-10 is different than 21-10, and then you don't go into the halftime feeling down about yourself. I'll even go back to the Packers 49ers game. Green Bay's up 7-0 late in the second quarter. They got an opportunity to kick a 39-yard field goal. It gets blocked, so it's 7-0 instead of 10-0. As a Packer fan, I'm like, we should be up 2 scores, not 1 score. In San Francisco, Kyle Shanahan told the sideline reporter, we're in good shape here. You can go back to the 2012 AFC Championship game. I think it was 13-7 Patriots at halftime, and John Harbaugh was like, we're okay. We're right in this game, whereas the Patriots had an opportunity to go up 17-7, and they didn't make it happen, and it kind of backfired on them. So go back to the Patriots wild card loss to Tennessee when they got stonewalled on fourth down. You kick a field goal there, maybe you're up, in a situation where you're in better shape to win the game. So look, I'll listen to Peyton Manning when he talks football, right? I mean, the guy's one of the greatest players ever. When he says something like that, that kind of makes sense. It's almost like in baseball, this inning's a little choppy. Let's get this run in. I'm going to hit a sacrifice fly. I'm going to do the best job I can at this. Maybe we're not going to have a 4-run inning, but you know what? Let's get one on the board and maybe take a little bit of momentum back.
Yeah, and again, that's what makes this whole thing not necessarily about old guys back in my day. This is how we played, or this is
right.
what. No, it's not about that. It's about accepting that analytics are flawed. I mean, you can't. And again, in a game like football that's so complicated. It's simple but complicated. Like the objective is simple, right? Like, okay, you line up, you have one side versus the other. You have, you pick plays and try to counteract it. It's a simple concept, but the actual process, the actual from meeting to huddle to snap to completion of a play, there's so much involved. And this is not just game to game. It's quarter to quarter, half to half, series to series, play to play. So to again dismiss analytics is not there's value in it. Like I said, I say it all the time. I'm not completely like ignoring analytics. There's value in it. I just think there's far more value. Actually, I think all the value really is in post viewing of the situation as opposed to being predictive. And that's fine, because again, I don't understand how you can predict this game. Like, you can predict general storylines, but you can't predict what's going to happen inside a game until a game starts. Like, I mean, there are times when you sit there and it's like right from the first snap, first series, you start to see how this game's going to play out. And an idea that you would never understand prior to that game. So there's no way to predict it. There's no number to put it. There's no number to weigh everything. So I guess again, if I'm hiring a coach, I better hope that he understands the balance in both of them. But then again, if I'm an analytics GM, probably I don't care. I just want the guy that I think is going to do the best job, and that's probably an analytics guy.
And chances, if you got your job because of analytics, and I'm going to just use Mike McDaniel as an example here. He's a brilliant guy, went to Yale. I'm not even sure if he played on the Yale football team, but he's more of an analytics guy, right? So he's going to continue on what got him there. He became the head coach of the Miami Dolphins at 39 years old because of this. He's going to probably attack things differently than, say, Ron Rivera, who was a really good player in the league, or if Jim Harbaugh ever came back to the NFL, who quarterbacked in the league. They're going to look at it differently than the analytics guy. Like, I think there's a happy medium where use analytics as a tool, but you can't just be married to analytics, and then you end up like Brandon Staley with the Chargers, who's just might as well be going to Vegas and putting $500 on black.
Yeah,
but basically he coaches the team.
Yeah, pretty much. But anyways, we did mention the Saints. Dennis Allen. They weren't. He wasn't the only person in the news for the Saints yesterday, and this could be potentially pretty bad for this team. But Alvin Kamara was arrested for battery in Las Vegas, and the crazy thing about this, apparently, John, this happened prior to the Pro Bowl. So he, this incident occurred. He played in the Pro Bowl, did everything like that, and then got arrested after the Pro Bowl. And they always report the worst case scenario in all these situations, and worst case for Alvin Kamara is that he would spend a couple years in prison. Whether or not that happens, I mean, we're so far away from any of that. I mean, to even speculate might be a little bit irresponsible right now. But the issue remains. This is a big problem for the Saints, because with all the transition they're going through, they don't have a quarterback. They just got a head coach. Who knows what's happening with Mike Thomas? Who knows what's happening with some of these defensive players? The one silver lining they had was, well, you still have Alvin Kamara, who's one of the best, not running backs, but best players in the entire league. I can guarantee you he's not going to be there week one.
No, I would hope not. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure the commissioner will suspend him for a period of time. Let alone, you would think.
You would think. Yeah.
Yeah, you would hope. Yeah, you would hope so. I mean, Lord knows he's busy doing other things. But yeah, you would think that. From what I understand, it was 8 punches to this person, and Alvin Kamara is not a small guy, and this infraction of whatever happened. And then he was allowed to play in the game, then put in jail. Like, it's like, who gets that type of benefit, that type of treatment? Yeah, I just committed a real heinous crime, a felony, but can I just play in the Pro Bowl and then I'll surrender? I mean, that's weird to go right there, and it kind of leads me to this thing is like, it's great that there's an NFL team in Vegas, but maybe it's not great that there's an NFL team in Vegas and the Pro Bowl's in Vegas, and I know a future Super Bowl is going to be hosted in Vegas. I mean, we've all been to Vegas. That's a very easy place to get in trouble, right? I mean,
but I don't look. I've seen that take. I don't think I'm gonna go that way though, because I mean, as much as Vegas is Vegas and Vegas has this reputation, everything like that. I mean, Atlantic City is how far away from New York City and New Jersey? How many professional sports teams are there? I mean, how many cities have their own? I mean, hell, I mean, you come down to Florida. I mean, Miami's got the Hard Rock Casino. Tampa's got the Hard Rock Casino. So I'm not going to just pass the buck onto Vegas. I think this is, I mean, look, you have to be responsible. I've been out to Vegas. I haven't punched someone 8 times in the face. You know what I mean? Like you have to act, and act responsible. I don't care where it is. Obviously there's certain laws that apply in Vegas or don't apply in Vegas that apply elsewhere. And as long as you're within the confines of the law, well, fine. But, learn to control yourself. Like, I don't think this is an issue. My issue with them going to Vegas is not so much putting players or anyone in a position to get in trouble. Mine is all about the hypocrisy of the NFL, and how and how these sports leagues, not just the NFL, have approached gambling up till this point, and then obviously have done a complete 180 on it. But so yeah, I mean, I'm not going to necessarily blame Vegas for this. I mean, just don't go out and assault someone. Like I mean,
that could have happened in any city.
Yeah, I'm 35 years old. I've never once assaulted anyone. You know what I mean? Like I've never just don't do that. So, yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting, obviously, to see how that plays out. That's going to be another off-season storyline because this isn't going to get resolved anytime soon. So for the Saints, that's a big problem. I mean, they don't know who their quarterback's going to be. Unless it's Taysom Hill. Good luck with that.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah, and
we're in stereo.
Yeah, well, and between that, it's like, okay, well, is Mike Thomas going to be healthy? Well, maybe. I mean, he's missed a lot of time, so maybe that's given him enough time to heal up and get out there and play some consistent football. Maybe not. Well, at least you have Alvin Kamara. Well, now you don't. So who are you? Maybe that's the other thing. Maybe this NFC South is so wide open that maybe it doesn't hurt them as much, but it still hurts them immensely and now puts them even further behind. So going to be tough going for the Saints moving forward. I'm not going to sit here and judge the NFC South because I really don't know. I mean, maybe Tom Brady does come back and then all of a sudden the Bucs are the favorite. Outside of that, I have no clue. I don't know who the favorite is in that division. I like the talent on the Bucs. I'm not saying they're not, but I mean, that's again, the numbers are what they say they are. Okay. This was the losingest franchise in the history of the NFL prior to Brady's arrival. And in the immediate history, not just franchise history, like they had been losing very consistently for the last decade plus. So am I going to believe that they're all of a sudden going to be a perennial contender without Brady? No, I got to see it first. I mean, I got to see it. And I think that's fair. So going forward, who's the NFC South king? Well, I'll give the slight edge to the Bucs just because, well, they're the defending champion, and the other teams haven't done much to inspire me to make me change my mind, and that's not saying much because look at Carolina, who's their quarterback? I don't know. What the hell are the Falcons doing? I don't know. Is Calvin Ridley coming back? I doubt it. Is this just going to be a 75% of what we're used to Falcons offense with the same awful defense that we've seen every year? Well, if that's the case, well, they'd be lucky to win 7 games. So I don't know what this conference is going to be like. The Saints are starting from behind, though, without a quarterback, without Alvin Kamara, presumably for at least some period of time. And we'll see. So once again, John, we have yet to mention the Super Bowl. I don't know if that's an indictment on the actual Super Bowl itself or the fact that there's just so much going on right now. But the Super Bowl is in 5 days, and we will certainly really start to get into it over the next several days as we close out the week here at FPC Radio Live. So until then, though, have a great day today. We will talk to you later. And yeah, that's it. Have a good one.